All right, great. Thanks for coming today. And Hailie, good to see you. How are you doing?
Likewise. I'm doing okay. How are you?
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah. So we're just about to get the ball rolling. Just want to welcome everybody this evening for joining us. Um, my name's Christian Murray, for those that don't know me. We're going to be hosting Schneps Media a number of forums for the 2023 council races. All 51 council seats are up for grabs this year, just 2 years after the previous election because of redistricting. Tonight, we have two candidates seeking to represent the 26th council district. We've got the incumbent council member, Julie Wan, and we also have Hailie Kim. So thank you guys for joining us today. The district's current representative is Julie, and she's a Sunnyside resident who first took office in January 2022, following a primary that included 15 Democratic candidates, and then she went on to win the November 21 general election. She's running against Hailie Kim, Sunnyside resident, and Hailie ran in the 2021 Democratic primary as well, and she finished in 8th. Now, I'll be serving as a co-moderator, and also joining me tonight is Serena, of course, who you know well. And she co-founded the Queen's Post with me many years ago, and is now the publisher of those sites and Borough Magazine, which covers Western Queens. So Serena's going to go through and sort of discuss the format tonight and sort of the rules and what have you. So Serena.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Christian. Tonight's debate and all of future debates will feature 2 rounds of questions. The first round will include questions that we've prepared, but the viewers will have a role in the second round. So if you have a question you would like to ask the candidates, feel free to submit them using the chat or the Q&A feature. Just click on the Q&A menu at the bottom of the screen, and we will be screening the questions we receive, and those selected will be put out to the candidates. So let's go to opening statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes for the opening statements to introduce themselves. When your time is up, you will hear the sound. All right, so let's start with Hailie.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Hailie Kim, running for City Council here in District 26. And one of the reasons I'm running is because this past year, really crucial services to our city were cut. Sanitation, public schools, libraries, parks, mental health, these were all under attack. I think these services and funding them reflect our community's values, and we want to make sure that we bring that to the negotiation table every year. One of the other things that we are dealing with is a homelessness crisis, which has been unprecedented since the Great Depression. The mayor has the sole power to raise rent on rent stabilized units every year through the Rent Guidelines Board, which abused their power last year to raise rent by more than it ever had in the last decade. And currently they are in discussion to raise rents on rent stabilized units by 7%. These are things that make life unsustainable here in District 26, along with things like making sure there is police accountability, making sure that we are utilizing our city funds on things that our community members actually depend on. And to kind of highlight my point, our police commissioner for the NYPD just either stepped down or was let go. It's unclear from media reports which it was, but it was after squabbling with Mayor Adams to try and hold police more accountable. So this is the kind of city that we live in, but not the one that we have to live in. We can have a city where parks, libraries, schools, sanitation, mental health, these are prioritized in our city budget. And that is what I'm going to fight for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hailie. And Julie?
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you, Christian and Zarina, and everyone on. My name is Julie Wan. I'm the current council member representing the 26th district. I'm currently at the Rent Guidelines Board hearing in Jamaica. I'm in the basement of a church right now. So if you hear noise behind me as I'm speaking, it's because of all the excitement upstairs fighting back to the Rent Guidelines Board. What I just testified upstairs is one of my first memories after moving to the United States was every Sunday, my parents and I would count quarters with my sibling to figure out if we're going to have enough to pay rent or if we're going to have enough to pay for laundry. And if we couldn't go to the laundromat, we spent that Sunday doing laundry in our bathtub. When we talk about 6% increases or 4% increases, it may not seem like a lot, but there are a lot of working class New Yorkers, especially in our district, which is 80% renters, who cannot pay the extra $100, $200 that could mean a whole month of groceries for them. So what I've done within my first term as a council member is I've approved more than 1,622 units of affordable housing that is permanent in our district, that is historic for a record in the entire borough of Queens, as well as making sure every single NYCHA resident has unlimited call and text, free Wi-Fi, and basic cable TV in their home, so that in the sense of another emergency, that nobody is left in the dark ever again, which was my main campaign promise when I ran 2 years ago. For our parks and our education, we've been more than funded than ever before, where I've increased funding by more than 10 million for both. And we made sure that we had funding for Windmiller Park, as well as Murray Park, and so many more that you could have information for. We'll be announcing another breaking ground for Big Bush Park this week. And we're going to continue that, where I'm one out of 13 members out of all 51 who have been chosen to be part of the budget negotiation team, so that we can continue to fight for a just budget. And as my term continues, I'll continue to be at the negotiation table to make sure that I fight as much as I can to get as most as we can for our city, especially our district, to make sure that everyone is taken care of to the best of my abilities. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you, and thank you so much for making this space and time for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Julie. So now we'll be moving on to the first round of questions. I just want to remind the candidates, you only have 2 minutes to answer. You might hear a beep when your time is up. And we will go back and forth in terms of who answers first. Julie will start the first question, and then Hailie with the second question, and so on. So Christian will ask the first question with the council member.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, this is for you, Julie, as Serena was saying. Now, last week, authorities shut down a brothel on Roosevelt Avenue in Woodside. 2 women were arrested for prostitution. Now, one of our reporters, Michael Dorgan, interviewed people as they walked by after the place was shuttered, and spoke to people, as they walked by, and they were of different backgrounds, Hispanic immigrants, Irish Americans, you name it. Most were pleased that it had been shut down. Now, how do you feel about this Woodside location being shut down? And what do you think about brothels and sex workers operating in the district?
I think it's really unfortunate that we even have to talk about the intensity of the situation. I believe in the Scandinavian model, and for my office, we've made it clear to anyone reaching out that we're focused on the women. When you talk about the 2 women who were arrested, the sex workers were more than 50 years old, and one was over 60 years old. These are working women who are doing the work because they need to survive. So what I'm doing is I've allocated more than $20,000 of funding, and I'm also advocating for another initiative on citywide for the next fiscal year with Garden of Hope, which is an organization that focuses especially on API women, because we know that the women are currently Asian American descent that are working at night and during the daytime, and making sure that they have workforce development so that they have other options for a source of income, and making sure that if there is human trafficking, through trust and trust building, that they're able to make sure that they're able to report it. But overall on this issue, this is a state legislative issue that has not moved, which I believe Jessica Gonzalez Rojas has the decriminalization bill for, that we really need to have a discussion on. And I want to make sure that we have quality of life and safety for everyone, but we have to get to the root of the cause, which is making sure that people have economic stability as well as socioeconomic ability to transform themselves, and also to make sure that we're going after the people who may be exploiting these women. If they're illegally running these not brothels, but massage parlors, that we're actually investigating them, not the workers, because we know what we've seen over the lifetime of being in Woodside. If you close down one location, you're going to see it open in another. And that's also because there's a demand for it. There are clearly people who are purchasing it, but we also have to make sure that if there is truly a need for the women, that we are creating spaces for them to be safe, and that they're able to economically mobilize themselves to move forward with their lives. And that's what we will continue to do, and that's what I've been advocating for.
All right, thank you, Julie. Hailie, what's your thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, I believe that the arrests were unconscionable. I am in full agreement with the council member here that these women need to be protected, but I do also think that the Scandinavian model kind of pushes the problem away a little bit. One of the things that we have to think about, yes, part of the reason why these women have to work is lack of economic opportunity. Absolutely, no debate there, but we also have to think of deeper root causes. I think one of them is the fact that we have a broken immigration system that does not allow for people to actually come into the country and find an easier pathway to citizenship. I think fixing that at the federal level, along with providing women with different economic opportunities, I think that will make it so that when these parlors actually pop up, they're not just being shoved aside to become another community's problem. Because so long as we do not address these issues, the issue is not going to be resolved. It will just come up somewhere else. And we need to make sure that that's not the case. The women deserve dignity, absolutely, and we need to prioritize that. But we also need to make sure that we are doing that in a way that takes into full consideration why these situations are happening, so that we can make sure that they never happen again.
Okay, thank you, Hailie. Serena?
Okay, so now we're going to start the next question with Hailie. You're going to answer first. Crime in the 108 precinct, which obviously covers the district, is up 14.5% year to date with robberies. I'm sorry, no, it's up 14.5% year to date. Do you think the current crime increase is a concern? And what can be done about this increase? Hailie?
I apologize, but the first part of the question came in a little bit fuzzy. I don't know if it's on my end or on everyone else's end, but I only got the last part of the question.
Okay, sorry, yeah, let me repeat it. Crime in the 108 precinct is up 14.5% year to date. Do you think the current crime increase is a concern, and what can be done about this increase?
Sure. Crime is a concern, of course. I would never make anyone feel like their concerns about safety were invalid. However, the question lies that is policing the right answer to solve these problems? And that's where we need to start the conversation, because I have experience doing work in Flushing where Asian Americans were being attacked all over the place. And we came up with a community-based model to make sure that people were feeling safer. I think there are many, many things that can be done about crime, including violent ones. But there were several people who I had to speak to during the course of my work who were attacked brutally in Flushing, in Elmhurst. You might recall the famous Louis Pizzeria incident where I helped the victim there tell her story, make sure that we were raising funds for her so she could kind of relax and not have to go back to work after experiencing that for a little bit. And one of the things that I learned is that each and every one of those times, it was never a police officer who came to their aid. It was always a member of the community, a small business owner, someone on the street. When I did encounter a mugging that I had to directly pull a victim away from, the police, who are approximately 10 minutes away, their precinct was about a 10-minute walk, did not arrive for 45 minutes while the community members there actually attempted to help this woman. So I think the question is, what is effective in getting rid of crime? Is it making sure that kids have good after-school programs to go to? Is it making sure that community members have just really good bystander intervention training that is also accessible in different ways, whether it's language, whether it's location, etc.? Because I think things will change when people who will be there when something happens, or God forbid, if something happens.
Okay, thank you. Time is up. Thank you, Hailie. And Julie?
I think it's really important to ground ourselves as a community to remember that within the percentage that you're talking about, the data of about 14% something of increase is for this year 2023 within the last 6 months. But if you actually look at crime from the last 10 years, 5 years, and 30 years, crime has actually gone down exponentially in our city, especially in our district. We live in one of the safest districts in Queens, as well as the city, thankfully, which is why we have one of the smallest precincts, because it's by crime level. But that's not to minimize the level of crime that has increased this year. We have been working closely with the 108 precinct, as well as 114, the commanding officer, and all the neighborhood community officers, youth officers, etc., and the district attorney's office to make sure that we're addressing extremely violent crimes. But I've also been very clear since the first time that I ran as one of the founding board members of Community Capacity Development. I've also increased historic levels of funding for them to have a community-based cure violence model in our district. And we've actually expanded the office, not just from Queensbridge houses for Long Island City, but to also to Woodside houses. And we're also in Astoria now. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing both. In the short term, with what we have right now in the current model, we're working with the local precincts to make sure that we're addressing perpetrators for the violent shootings that have taken place, and they have been identified. The perpetrators have been identified and arrested, and they were all separate, isolated incidents, and they were targeted. They were not random. And in addition to that, we've also increased funding. I've given more than $100,000 to the Cure Violence organization to make sure that we are doing public outreach, making sure that there's youth programming. And we also just approved a new youth center, recreation center, in partnership with Long Island City YMCA in Queens Plaza, which will have both recreation space as well as programming space funded by the developer to make sure that youth have somewhere to go after school. Since we are seeing a lot of the petty crime is conducted by teenagers. And we're also making sure that working closely with schools to make sure that the schools feel like they have enough programming, like increasing the CASA program, Chess in Schools, and other musical programs and tech programs in partnership with Museum of Moving Image. So we'll continue to move forward this way to make sure that we're looking at things holistically to prevent crime before it starts and to address crime when it happens, and to also make sure that we have a long-term plan to address crime, and also looking at it holistically because it is a symptom of poverty. As we live in high inflation and recession, as people get more desperate, people will be looking to desperate measures to make their ends meet. And we want to make sure that all of our food pantries are funded. We have Evangel Food Pantry as well as others that I could provide a list for to make sure that people have food on the table and that we have job opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, okay, so this question is for you this time. Julie, you start. You okay there? Julie,
Yes,
you okay?
sorry. Yes,
No.
I just had to get one water bottle.
Oh, that's all right. I know you're out and about.
Yes.
Okay, so this question comes back to zoning and land use matters. The rezoning application for innovative QNS, a massive development slated to go up in the vicinity of Steinway Street and 35th Avenue in Astoria, was approved in November 2022. Rezoning allows the developers to build 3,200 units, 1,400, I'm sorry, must be affordable or below market rate. Of the 1,400, 800 will be for households considered considered low income. Now, council member, you negotiated that deal. Do you consider that a victory? And also, what more could be done, do you believe, to bring affordable housing to the district?
I think there is always room for more. You know, in an ideal world, if I had a magic wand, it would be 100% affordable. But we know that with private land, with high markets, like we have in Long Island City, Astoria, Woodside, Sunnyside, it wasn't feasible financially for us to get there. But we pushed as hard as we could, where we doubled the number of affordable units from 700 to 1,400, as well as double the amount of family-sized units, because we don't want studios on one bedroom. We don't want temporary housing. We want permanent housing where people can age in place and grow with their families. And in addition to that, we made sure that there were protections, $2 million to make sure that there were eviction protections for anti-displacement with a legal organization locally called Communities Resist, and so much more. And it was only thanks to all the local organizations like CAV, Astoria Not for Sale, Woodside on the Move, who I'm here with right now, who just gave you the water, and all of our elected officials, Congresswoman AOC, as well as Nydia Velasquez and so many others that rallied with us because they know how broken the land use system is. And they also know on a federal level how broken our affordable median income is. And we know that those benchmarks are not are not actually applicable to today's reality of how many people are getting evicted, how many people are short on rent and rent burden, which is more than 50% of us, who are paying 50% of their household income for rent. And the fight continues. I know that right now, this is just the beginning, right? People now know how I play the game, of how I negotiate my land use deals. And they know when they underestimated me and said, okay, let's wait until after the public hearing to deal with Julie. Then we showed up with buses like today, with more than 200 people from my district to say, we need more affordable housing. And for your question of how do we deal with affordable housing, we just opened the first set of supportive housing for CUNY homeless students in Long Island City. That's first of a kind. And we know that we have many shelters in our district for migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and everyday New Yorkers. And it's not enough to have city just supportive housing. We've also increased legislation for city VEFS vouchers, which is what I included in my original Innovation Queens negotiation as well, because we know that with the voucher system, it's not enough for folks to have permanent housing, and we can't warehouse folks anymore. But we need to have long-term solutions to get people to permanent housing, and we'll continue to do that. And it's going to be holistic, like I talked about, for public safety and making sure that we have job opportunities, working with unions to make sure that there are real jobs for our local union members as we continue on, and making sure that we are fixing AMI on a federal level, making sure that we're actually fixing the land use
I'm gonna have
process.
to get you to wrap it up, Julie. Sorry.
Yes. To end, you will see in July, we'll be announcing a comprehensive plan for our district, because we're sick and tired of spot zonings. And we have been screaming and kicking. I know Zarina and I were there on community board, where we have asked for comprehensive
Julie, I've
planning
got
in
to
our
cut
district.
you off. I don't want to
So-
cut you off, but I've got to cut
Yep.
you off to
That's
abide
what we'll
by the
be doing.
rules.
Thank you.
Okay. Hailie, what do you got to say? Did you think the councilwoman handled Innovation Q&S well, or do you think more could have been negotiated? And what do you think? How do you think we could bring more affordable housing to the 26th council district?
I mean, I think the amount of affordable housing landed on in this project is fine. I don't think it's a matter of whether I think we got enough agreements from the developers. The question is, how are they going to pay for it? As soon as this happens, there's articles coming out saying that they're going to use this as an excuse to kind of bring back some form of 421A tax breaks, which I don't think that's how we see housing. If we're truly going to see housing as a human right and not as a commodity, we cannot depend on private developers to build these affordable units, at least not solely. We need to make sure we're doing things like expanding the number of rent stabilized units throughout the city, legalizing basement apartments. We also live in several flood zones where people do live in affordable basement units, but they get flooded every time there's a climate disaster. That's not right. If they are safe, they're regulated, this can become a form of affordable, dignified housing for our community members. So I think this needs to be thought of not from just the perspective of development, which is unfortunately just kind of a thing that happens if you live in a big city, okay? But it is, yes, about what you can get from the developer, how they can pay for it, and also how do you expand with the urgency needed, the amount of affordable housing units now. If we go up to someone who's homeless now and ask them, in 10 to 20 years, we can have housing for you through this voucher, I don't think that's going to be something that they feel addresses this issue with the urgency that they deserve. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hailie. I saw you raising your hand, Julie. Did you have a rebuttal? If so, you have 1 minute.
I just wanted to say I agree with making sure that we legalize basement apartments, but that's a state legislation that would be under state jurisdiction, not city. And in addition to that, we have negotiated to make sure that all the 100% affordable units for the Innovation Queens project would be covered by HPD, regardless of when, not contingent on 421A being reformed or whatever it is they do on a state level, again, not on a city level. So we already have that in place, and it's also not my job to figure out how the financiers of development are going to pay for a project. That's what they do in order to submit a project, and they go through a very lengthy process, which they have the investors for, especially with Silverstein projects and Kaufman.
All right, thank you, Julie. So this next question, we're going to start with Haley. There has been an increase in the number of smoke shops that have been illegally selling cannabis in the district. What is your stand in this? How do you think this should be handled?
I mean, as much as we like legalizing weed here for different reasons, I do think that if we should be regulating this, right? That's part of the deal. I do think that we should be making sure that teenagers aren't being sold weed. Just yeah, it's really bad for their development, and we don't want that. Pretty simple answer there. Thank you.
Thank you, and Julie?
Again, this is a state legislative issue. So we've been working closely with our state senator to make sure, state senators and state assembly members, to make sure that this legislation and the new regulations are continued to be implemented, because we know that the first round has not been as smooth, and also understanding how important it is to have enforcement when something very illegal is happening, like people being sold underage. We've had multiple schools call us with panic because children are able to purchase these marijuana gummies and they bring it to school and give it to other students without consent. That has led them to go into panic attacks or other hospitalized issues. Marijuana itself can be decriminalized, but we have to make sure that there is a plan in place, the same way that when DCWP, the Consumer Worker Protections, had a huge marketing campaign in schools as well as others when vapes came into the market, the flavored smoking. And we had to do education, and the same should be done for marijuana as well, to make sure that we're protecting underage minors.
All right, thank you, Julie. This question is for you now. Deals with outdoor dining. The mayor and the council speaker have come to some sort of agreement on a deal in terms of sidewalk seating and dining and roadside dining. Now, the deal would see outdoor or roadside sheds up for about 9 months of the year, except for, I guess, the cold winter months. Now, people have complained about the sheds, have made statements like there's difficulty with street cleaning, noise, trash, rats. Meanwhile, you've got people on the other side that say it's led to a more vibrant city, it's been a great boost for business, new jobs, etc. What is your view on roadside dining, and how do we keep a balance of both of those constituencies, so to speak?
We have worked with our local bids, LICP, as well as Sunnyside Shines, and our Woodside business partners to get feedback from the business owners, a survey, and we've also been making sure that we're synthesizing it as this legislative process has been ongoing. And we've pleaded with the council speaker as well as the mayor's office to make sure that it's individualized by district, because a district by district basis, because every district's needs and its desires are different. For us, I want to make sure that it's clear for the 9 months, if you want to have outdoor dining, you still can as a business. It doesn't outlaw it. But what it's doing is going back to existing regulations that existed before COVID, is that you have to have your permits and licensing, and you have to pay taxes to have additional outdoor dining, which is fair because some people have expanded their business. And what I've also heard from my surveys is if you're a business that is outside of a bus stop or a fire hydrant, you don't even have the ability to have outdoor dining, and what that does for your competition, etc. And there are a lot of nuances to this issue where we're working closely with every single business, and we've had DCWP's commissioner just come by, as well as DOT. Yodanis Rodriguez was here today, and we also work closely with Kevin Kim, the small business commissioner, to make sure that everyone's needs are met, that their questions are answered in their language in real time, to make sure that everyone who is exploring, continuing to have their outdoor dining shed, that they are up to code, that they're going to be good neighbors to all of us in the case that people are worried about street cleaning or about rats, to make sure that everyone is getting their fair share and doing their part in our loving neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Hailie, do you want me to repeat the question, or you got it?
I think I've got it. It's
All
about
right, yeah,
the
it's
and the
dining
kind of
sheds,
yeah.
and the different views on it. Yeah.
So, I mean, as the council member pointed out, it is a really complicated issue. I'm very glad that we're speaking as a community to try and find the best path forward. Personally, I do think that 9 months out of the year, having these sheds there incentivizes cheap sheds. And so year round might be better and help kind of create better structures that might actually be more implemented into the community. But it's such a subjective issue, right? And gosh, like, weren't we so grateful for them when COVID first started, and we could not go out to eat unless it was at these sheds. So, I think we need to acknowledge the role that these sheds have had in our community when we needed them most, and the impact that it had economically in helping keep some of these businesses alive. So yeah, like, I definitely think we need to keep thinking about it, but that's where I'm at now. I think maybe year round would kind of incentivize better structures.
Okay, thanks. Serena, you got the next question?
Yes, so the next question, we're gonna start with Hailie to answer first. The migrant crisis has led to more than 70,000 asylum seekers coming to New York City in the past year. Many of these immigrants are being temporarily housed at hotels in the 26th Council District. In your opinion, is the city providing the district with the support that it needs? And what strain is it putting on our community? And what is the solution?
I absolutely don't think we're getting enough support from the city. I also don't, more importantly, I don't think these people who are asking for help in our city are getting the support that they need. To house people who come here looking for a home in places like hotels where they can't even cook their own meals, that's not right. I think people deserve a sense of permanency. And if we're truly saying that we're welcoming migrants into our city, we need to make sure that they can actually feel like it's a home, not just a place where they're kept. So I believe that at the end of it, dignity for these people is going to have to be a priority for all of us. And yeah, the city needs to be in full support of this. I find Mayor Adams's xenophobic language about the migrant crisis really disturbing most of the time. And I think the fact that he just recently paraded his support for immigrants, supposedly, when these are immigrants as well, they just need a path to citizenship. And I'm sure they want to be part of our community. And I want to make sure that we help them do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
As an immigrant myself, we have made it clear in my district that this is a sanctuary city, and we will do everything we can to make sure that we are welcoming them. There's been more than 70,000 migrants that have come through our city in less than a year now. And for the services that the shelter providers are providing right now, is it enough? No, I don't think so. But our city was not ready for this influx of migrants, but they're doing the best they can. But I've had press conferences with Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, as well as other elected officials with organizations like NYC, to make it clear that we need to do better. We had last holiday around December, we had a migrant commit suicide in one of our shelters, and that was heartbreaking. To hear the widow's story of how they came here by foot from Venezuela looking for a better life, yet they were given just cold sandwiches and sometimes rotten sandwiches, and even getting phone calls from schools saying children have rapid weight loss because they're not getting enough food in the shelter system. That is heartbreaking. So we've partnered with local nonprofits like Evangel Food Pantry and others, and we have gotten an increase in funding, but we need more. And that's what I'm fighting for this budget cycle, to make it clear that it has to be a tiered system, not an equal amount of funding for all food pantries throughout the city or for immigrant services throughout the city, but looking at the parts of the city that have taken in the largest influx of migrants and making sure that there is equity in funding for those districts. In addition to that, I just spoke earlier about the city thefts voucher legislative package that we passed. Instead of having to now by law wait 90 days within the shelter system for you to qualify for a city thefts voucher to move into permanent housing, we have gotten rid of that so that people can be on the brink of eviction in your home currently as a New Yorker and have access to city thefts voucher so that you could use that to supplement your rent before having to be evicted. Same thing for migrants and refugees and asylum seekers. They should not be warehoused for more than 90 days in a shelter. They should have the ability to move themselves out. And I know that the federal government right now, we've worked with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to make sure that we're getting work authorizations from the federal government to allow these folks to work, not just under the table, but officially, so that they can get moving with their lives, because they came here with dreams of opportunity like my family did. And we owe it to them to grant them the opportunity to work so that they could have their own socioeconomic independence.
Well, thank you, Julie. You've got the next question, actually, and it deals with the city budget, something that you've talked about already. Currently, there are stark differences between what the mayor and the mayor wants and what the city council members are looking for in the budget, 2024 fiscal budget. The mayor has enacted cuts across city agencies, arguing that the city needs to be fiscally prudent given the cost of the migrant crisis. While several council members say that we have enough revenue to restore these cuts and fund new initiatives. Now, how are you approaching the budget negotiations with City Hall, and what are you advocating for, given the climate there?
The executive budget was released in March, as well as his November plan last year, where the council budget negotiation team got together and we did our preliminary budget response, where the council said no cuts to essential services like education, health, schools, libraries, and so forth. And then he responded to us with cuts all across the board with additional 4% pegs. So that's the kind of mayor that we currently have. And what you're hearing in the news is half true, because we do have revenue, but we don't want to touch our reserves. It's not fiscally wise for us to do so, but that doesn't mean that we may not do that. That's why for the first time ever in more than 100 years, the council body actually went to Washington, D.C. to advocate to Senator Schumer, as well as the overall New York delegation, for federal funding, which they have agreed to give us $100 million to start for the migrant crisis and more to come. So we need to make sure that we're getting our federal partners and our state partners to join in on funding, because it cannot be on the city, where, unlike the state of New York or the federal government, we cannot print money, and we also cannot loan money against our own selves as a city, which is not a bad thing. This is actually better for us. So we need to make sure that we continue to apply pressure on our state governor. Governor Hochul, during her State of the Address, did not even mention the migrants in her State of the Address. She cannot just be a governor when it's convenient of New York City, but she has to be a governor full time. And all of our elected officials from federal level, we have to make sure that we're continuing to apply pressure to get federal funding, because what we're dealing with right now, more than 60,000 migrants in our city in less than a year. That is a lot of people to feed and house, and our city is just not, there was no way for us to prepare for it financially. So one, it's clear that you will see from me that I am going to continue to fight for funding the way that I have last year, to make sure that my schools are fully funded, as that's been announced by the DOE on their website, and make sure that our libraries are fully funded. I was just with the Queens Public Library and Dennis Walcott, continuing to fight with them as an ally, and continuing that our social services for all of our nonprofits are fully covered, in addition to making sure that our federal government are paying their fair share. Everyone's going to pay. And you have a friend in me to make sure that happens.
All right, thank you, Julie. Hailie, what are your thoughts on the matter? Do you need me to read the question again, or you good?
I would appreciate if you did. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, basically the mayor and the city council are sort of, got a different view. Obviously the mayor is focused very much on cost. He's talked about $4.3 billion, the cost of the migrant crisis until the end of next year. Then there's talks about, some members of the council think revenue is going to be higher than what the mayor thinks. So the question is, given all of these, backs and forwards, what would you prioritize in terms of handling the negotiations?
I mean, first and foremost, it seems very clear we need to stand up to a bully of a mayor who wants to get his own way. And I think one of the things I love about our district is that we've pretty much had leaders throughout my time living here who have been willing to stand up to bullies like Eric Adams. And the unfortunate reality is that our schools have been cut $7 million after adjustments in our district. And one of the things that we also want to make sure that we're making clear is that the budgets that this mayor is proposing are austerity budgets. You cannot eat austerity, but you can live off of dignity. And that's what I'm proposing. I want a budget that really fully funds our schools, fully funds our libraries, fully funds mental health services, fully funds parks and sanitation, because these are services that our city deserves. And we can't step back and let some man bully us. I mean, we're talking about how we have a majority woman council for the first time, which is fantastic. But we need to use that and show these men who want to bully us what we can do too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hailie. Serena?
I think Julie has her hand up. Do you have a rebuttal? You have 1 minute.
For this fiscal year that we're talking about in this budget question, I want to make it clear the DOE announced, and it's on their website, there is no budget cuts to our district. And for the last fiscal year, you could call your PTA presidents, your principals, look at the DOE website. We've had an $11 million surplus for our school district because we're over enrolled, which the DOE also just testified, because the fair student funding formula in which we calculate how to fund our schools is based on student enrollment, and all of our schools are majority over enrolled, which has been testified for by the chancellor and the deputy chancellor, which is also available on our social media or on the council website.
Hailie has a response to that. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And if we do look on the BOE website, they also cite the Galaxy allocations budget, because the fair student funding only accounts for approximately 65% of the total education budget. So essentially, here numbers from the BOE website that cite $7,586,981 in cuts to District 26 specifically after damages were mitigated. I have data here that says Community Education Council District 30 took a $15,391,424 cut, and Community Education Council District 24 took a $33,202,200, or just, it's in the tens of millions at this point after mid-year adjustments. And on top of that, even if by some funny math, if her funny math is correct, there were other schools throughout the city that were held not. Then, I mean, what about those other kids? Like, is it okay for their schools to be cut?
All right, thank you, Hailie. We should really stop, but it's a very interesting conversation. So, and Julie raised her hand again. We're going to give her another minute to respond.
I think it's really important for our parents to make sure that they speak to their principals and their teachers and their CEC presidents, etc., to really understand the fair student funding formula. And as she laughs here, because this is something that's funny for her, it's really important to also know that for the education budget, it has been printed again that the schools were held harmless from the DOE website about this upcoming fiscal year. And last year for mid-year adjustments, schools were held harmless. If you believe that whatever you want to say is something that you want to continue to lie to folks about and be divisive, then you continue on. But as a parent in this district who is going to be sending their kids through the public school system, I'm going to continue to fight for my public education system. I visited every single principal in my district and have been working closely with them to make sure that we're looking long-term. Because if you're losing enrollment in your schools, whether to private schools or to charter schools, especially during the pandemic when we lost more than 25% of our student body throughout the city, then you have to work with them long-term to think about what is it strategically that children are not feeling like this school is competitive enough for them to attend. So if it was STEM, then we got them a hydroponics lab. If it was the arts, then we increased arts programming and music, and making sure that we made capital investments so that the schools can compete with newer, shinier buildings and whatever it is that they needed to make sure that our schools are up to date. And I will allow the parents and the teachers, the PTAs and the principals to speak for themselves for what I have done to work closely with them to make sure that my schools are protected, and I'll continue to do so. And there are New York Times articles about it as well.
All right, thank you.
Math.
Hailie, do you still want to respond to that?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's do 1 minute.
Yeah.
And this is the last one.
Yeah, we're talking data versus feelings here. The data states that there were cuts versus talk to these people, I mean, I'm sorry, but I believe the data.
Okay, so let's move on. Haley, you can respond to this first. The NYPD has a gang database that it argues is a vital tool to fight crime. The database consists of a list of names of people who have admitted to being part of a gang, wear gang colors, or are known to hang around areas where gang activity takes place. And the NYPD says it helps combat crime. Now, there is legislation before the City Council looking to get rid of the database on the basis that it unfairly targets Black and Brown New Yorkers, and that it often includes the wrong people. So Haley, would you back such a bill, and would that affect our safety?
I'm sorry, I was trying to get your attention a little bit because there's an echo coming on in my end that makes it difficult to clearly understand what you're saying.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Is that better?
A little bit,
You're ahead an echo. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Let me repeat the question.
Yeah, would you mind repeating the question? And I'll, if I hear an echo, I'll just kind of do this together.
Okay, sounds good.
Mhm.
So the NYPD has a gang database that it argues is a vital tool to fight crime.
Mhm.
And there is legislation before the City Council looking to get rid of the database on the basis that it unfairly targets Black and Brown New Yorkers.
Mhm.
So would you back such a bill, and would that affect public safety?
Do I support getting rid of the gang database? Do you
Mhm.
mean? Yes, absolutely. It does unfairly target Black and Brown New Yorkers. I don't think that's a question. But yeah, my answer is very simple. I absolutely support getting rid of it. Thank you. And
Okay.
also, I think you also asked about whether I thought it would affect crime rates.
Public safety, yes.
Yeah. I don't think it will. I think one of the things that we know is that children who are in these gangs need alternatives, like after school programs. They are in the middle of desperate poverty. We need to help alleviate that, and that's how we actually get rid of these things. Again, long-term effective solutions are what I'm after.
Great. So Julie, you are a sponsor of this bill. Could you tell us what motivated you to sponsor this bill, and are you concerned that it might affect public safety?
Yep, I've been a co-sponsor of the bill, and I've been an advocate of the bill even before I took office, because working closely with community capacity development, I've seen firsthand how the majority of the records in the gang database are inaccurate. Right now, obviously, it's 99% Black men and majority Black teenagers who are in the system for having any affiliations. You could be at a barbecue, and if there's a photo of the barbecue and there was a shooting there, you are now part of a gang. And there are many, many examples that the advocates have in how hurtful this is to Black and Brown people, and how racially, systemically racist this is, that we can continue to make sure that you have the data for. And it isn't just about public safety, but it's about making sure that there's racial justice, that we aren't just keeping a list of Black and Brown teenage boys' names in a list, which may harm them in the long run, like having job placements or anything else, or being able to rent a home in the future because they're part of a gang database, which they had no real true affiliations to a gang, but they were seen in a photo wearing red or a certain color that may be affiliated with a gang with no real evidence or proof. And it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and there is no proof, but yet they are put on this list anyway.
Okay, thank you, Julie. My next question is for you. Assemblyman Juan Ardilla, whose district incorporates much of the 26th council district, has been accused, as everybody knows, by two women of groping them at a party in 2015. The allegations became public in March. His initial statement was, "I apologize for my behavior. I spent time reflecting, and I hope to prove I've matured since college." Today, he issued a statement categorically denying the incident for the first time. Now, Councilwoman, you have called for him to step down. Do you maintain this position given the fact that he denied it today? And do you believe his latest statement?
No, I do not believe his latest statement. I believe the women who, especially one who is a constituent that has come to me after the story had broke, asking me for legal services so that she could have protections because of his own unapologetic behavior. And now we're seeing, as you laid out the timeline, he apologized, admitted to it. Now he's backtracking, saying he didn't do it, and he's not even sorry anymore. Yet there are witnesses and women who have been very harmed by this. And instead of going through the restorative justice process, as he said that he would, instead he has thrown the Working Families Party under the bus. He has slandered our Congress member. He has tried to throw me under the bus. But worst of all, he is blaming his victims and saying what she wore or what she did. None of that is relevant. This is not 1990. You're not going to get away with sexual assault or sexual misconduct by blaming women for your problems. But he has to make sure that he is held accountable and is actually responsible for what has happened and does what is right for our community, because our community we're hurting. It is not in my favor to have an assembly member who's a lame duck that can't pass legislation or provide funding for my district. Now we have a funding gap where Kathy Nolan, our former assembly member, was able to get millions for the whole entire district. Now we got a mere $250,000 that went to Jeffrey and Aubrey, another assembly member in another part of Queens, to designate our funding for our district and services. And you know how badly we need these services and the funding. So it is just unbelievable. And I still believe the women, and he should resign.
Hailie, what are your thoughts on the way it's all gone down?
Yeah, I totally believe the women. I think his statements really do prove that he did in fact commit sexual assault. And like both the council member and I are women who, I mean, we are in complete agreement that women deserve to be believed when they come forward with things like this. I mean, I'm a survivor of sexual assault myself when I was very young. And one of the things that did stop me from reporting it was because I didn't think anyone would believe me. And I think this is the sort of thing that perpetuates that fear. I think his statements were insufficient. They do not express remorse. And I agree that he should resign.
All right. Thank you very much, Hailie. Serena?
Okay, just before I move on to the next question, or the last question, I want to remind the audience, the attendees, if you have any questions for the candidates, please submit it in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So for this next question, Hailie is going to start this, right? Yeah. The DOT is turning 46th Street between Queens Boulevard and Greenpoint Avenue into an open street. Most of the businesses on that strip have signs on their windows in opposition to it, and they argue that it will hurt businesses and make deliveries difficult. Now, do you support it, and what do you say to these business owners?
As the daughter of a former small business owner whose business went down under, I think we should absolutely be doing everything possible to help keep these businesses alive. I hear all the concerns. On the other hand, I am unsure whether I think that they will actually affect the businesses in question. I do believe in open streets. I believe in more bike lanes. I think these are things that we should be making better, essentially. And on top of that, we should absolutely be providing these businesses with services and making sure that they have what they need to thrive in our community, because that's what makes our little neighborhood here in Sunnyside so special, is our small businesses. Thank you.
For 46th Street, we know from Hospitality Alliance and other business organizations like the Sunnyside Shines bid, where they have bid coalition across the city as well. What we've seen across the city, especially throughout the pandemic, is how incredibly beneficial it is to have open streets for small businesses, for increased foot traffic, as well as increased business for the business providers. But I do also recognize for what happened with Boulevard or with 46th Street, we have to make sure that we have due process for democracy in our city. We did not have a public hearing, and we need to make sure that we have a chance for their voices to be heard, because the members that community members that I've met with, they had concerns about usage of that street for loading for the small businesses, which I know that Sunnyside Shine has already committed to having someone there full time to remove the barriers when deliveries come in. And it's also, there's a lot of misinformation where it's only for a certain period of time per day to make sure that there is a closed street, which is going to be beneficial for the whole district. And in addition to that, for accessibility needs for seniors or anyone who needs ADA accessible, those issues need to be addressed. And we're going to continue to work closely, where I'm setting up a meeting with DOT and the concerned citizens to make sure that their questions and concerns are addressed, and that they don't feel like they're going to continue to be bulldozed by Department of Transportation if they disagree. Because we as a community will always, we're never going to agree on everything, but I do agree at the heart of the matter, it's clear that everyone cares about our small businesses, thankfully. And we want to see them thrive. And we're going to continue to protect them, promote them, and continue to work closely together on all sides to make sure that this is something that is beneficial for them and that we see increased growth in businesses for them.
All right, thank you, Julie.
Okay, so we have some questions from the chat. Let me start with a co-op shareholder and a board member in District 26. Local Law 97, which is part of 2019's Climate Mobilization Act, will be the biggest issue facing co-ops in the next 5 to 10 years. It requires buildings to retrofit electric infrastructure or pay substantial annual penalties. As we talk about housing affordability, we'd like Julie Wan and Hailie Kim both to discuss their plan to address the severe financial strain facing co-ops, strain that has the potential to leave residents and buildings insolvent, as well as the feasibility issues associated with this law. Now let's start with, who did you start with last? Hailie?
I actually believe we started with
Really?
me last time, so I think it's Julie's turn to go
Okay,
first.
so Julie, I'm sorry, let's start with you.
So I want to make it clear, Local Law 97 is a law that predates me in the council. It passed before I took office. It was with Jimmy Van Bramer, which had astounding support from the city and the state level to make sure that we're fighting for climate justice. And we just went through a wildfire where we could barely breathe because of the wildfires in Canada. And it's really clear firsthand, right? We're experiencing the effects of climate crisis. So with all that said, I also want to make it clear, I was even open in the Working Families Party endorsement process, where I had real concerns about costs for working class New Yorkers, because I have, for example, Big Six Towers, which is a Mitchell-Lama affordable housing co-ops, who are already in debt for millions of dollars because they can't keep up with all these climate laws that continue to pass. So I've worked closely with my former elected officials, my overlapping elected officials, and I currently just held another meeting with all of my federal elected officials for the Big Six Towers. I'm happy to do so for other co-ops in my district, to make sure that the federal government is hearing how badly we need investment, and we need to make sure that there are subsidies and grants for these co-ops, because these are working class New Yorkers. Co-ops are the fastest way for us to continue to build equity for ourselves as individuals and households, and we should not be diminishing them with overburdening them with maintenance fees and so forth. I'm also holding another info session for Local Law 97 to make sure that Department of Buildings and HPD are there being held to the fire, because they vouch to the public that they will have accelerator programs and other grants and other programs for our seniors, which we had registrations for at Big Six Towers and will continue to do so for, and continue to work with them to make sure that all these fees and fines are met, because this is not okay. Because at the essence of the law, we all agree that climate justice is needed, but we have to make sure that this is something that is affordable for us in a reasonable time frame, as fast as we can, to make sure that we are building a brighter future for our children in this world, so that we are not having asthma wheezing attacks like me during a debate.
Thank you, Julie. Hailie?
Yeah, absolutely agreed that environmental justice is crucial here. I mean, I think all the filters that were purchased during that like fog was just kind of tremendous. And it is showing us that we are getting to a place where we're paying for clean air, which I never thought would happen. But on top of that, we already live in a very environmentally impacted area. We are called Asthma Alley, which that comes from years of neglect and just the continued operation of dirty power plants. And I do support the law, and I do agree that working class co-ops do not deserve to be financially penalized for wanting to do the right thing. I think there needs to be subsidies and grants for these co-ops, and I think we need to say yes, and also just kind of work with them to get them to a place where they can also feel comfortable saying yes.
Thank you. And moving on to the next question, and I think we're going to make it shorter, where it's going to be 1 minute to respond. The next question from the audience is, how will you regulate the use of facial recognition in NYC? Should the police or businesses be restricted from using this technology as they see fit?
I'm sorry, there was such a horrible echo there.
I'm sorry. How will you regulate the use of facial recognition in NYC? And should the police or businesses be restricted from using this technology as they see fit? Hailie?
I absolutely believe that they deserve to be regulated, especially if used by NYPD. I think one of the things that we can do is acknowledge that this infringes on civil liberties, and it just makes sure that yeah, our privacy is protected, which is the heart of the matter.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
I'm in support of the biometric ban for small businesses because we know that there are a lot of studies that show biases for socio and racial biases for AI as well as biometric data, and we know how harmful it could be. Because even right now, for example, we just uncovered during a hearing where I asked the city what they were doing with our children's data in DOE, and they were allowing third parties to sell or give it to charter schools. That's just an example. So we know that we have to make sure that data privacy is top of the matter. And with my last 10 decades in tech, I will continue to be very vocal as I advocate for data protections and data privacy, especially for our children and minors in the tech committee that I sit on.
Great, well, thank you, Julie. We're just going to wrap it up with the closing statements. So first of all, each candidate will have 2 minutes. Julie, if you could go first, please.
Thank you so much, Christian, Zarina, and Schneps, for hosting this really important session. I look forward to continuing to work closely with the community and answering any other questions that we may have unanswered today. Please feel free to reach out to my government office Monday to Friday, 10 to 6. I'm going to continue to be the advocate that you have seen me be. And as you heard from the beginning, from my opening statement, this is about my lived experiences and what I'm currently dealing with now as an everyday New Yorker, just like everyone else who lives in our district. And you'll continue to be my focus and priority. And for our district office, we'll continue to focus on what we hear from you. We keep a pretty close track of our constituent services. We have more than 2,300 cases open where we've analyzed and categorized them by what your priorities are, which is how we determine to make sure that last year we did 70% of our capital funding for schools. This year it's 100% to our schools as well as parks. And next year we'll continue to increase our funding for parks, and hearing from you directly what our district needs will continue to be really important, whether it be public safety, education, libraries, whatever it is that you care about. We'll make sure to listen to you and that your needs and your issues are reflected in our legislative priorities as well as our budget priorities. So thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to seeing you out in the streets.
Thank you, Julie. And Hailie, if you'd like 2 minutes to wrap up in a closing statement.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us here. It was quite the debate, right? I think it got a little spicier than what people were intending for, but I am running to make sure that we get funding back for these services. We know what our community prioritizes. We prioritize our schools. We prioritize our parks. We prioritize sanitation and mental health services and all these other things that we love about our neighborhood. And that is why I'm running, because I believe these services deserve to be fully funded. And if I'm elected, that is something I will vow to fight for in the face of bullying mayors, in the face of threats from Adrian Adams. I think this is stuff that we can get done. We just need to make sure that we have organizers in city council who are going to be effective in doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hailie, and thank you, Julie. This concludes our Democratic primary debate for the 26th Council District. So all the attendees, everyone who's watching, the early voting primary begins on Saturday, June 17th. Primary day itself is on Tuesday, June 27th. And remember, every election, large or small, is an important one, so please vote. Thank you for watching and have a great evening, everyone. Bye.